Hi, thank you for joining me today, and today's process video is the layout kit that I'm creating for the Warrington Papercrafters Crop held on July the 15th. We do a page kit every time we have a crop, and today I'm using Keeping It Real, from Pinkfresh Studio. So I've just pulled out 3 of the papers from the collection. First of all, this card paper, I'm cutting out the right hand side strip of the cards, and I'll be using some of these on the layout. So that one that says today's walk, the good enough arrow that was at the bottom, and then from the second column along I also cut out that real life 2x2 card that I think will work nicely. Then I moved on to this paper with all the circles, and straight away I saw the circle on the left hand side that says highs and lows, it will be okay, and I think this will work nicely as well. The photo that I've chosen is one of the children walking for their taster day at their high school that they were starting in the September. This photo was taken in the July. So these phrases are fairly generic and they could be used for all sorts of different things. You can see there I've also punched out an arrow using my 3/4 inch punch. Using my 1 inch punch. Oh my goodness. And then I'm also from the third paper cutting out this semicircle that says a walk in the park. So just going back to what I was saying, all these phrases that I've chosen are fairly generic, so they will work with all sorts of things. A walk in the park could mean that somebody found something really easy. So I tried to choose things that would work for all sorts of different photos. So I'm taking the backs of these 2 papers now and tearing 2 strips, and I'm going to roll the torn edges and then add some pom-pom trim underneath the first paper. So that's the first paper going down there, and then the second paper, the pale blue to the right, and I've got some pale blue pom-pom trim here. So just rolling up the edges to make it easier to tuck that pom-pom trim neatly underneath, and then I'm going to glue this down with my wet adhesive, as you can see here, taking care not to add glue too close to the right hand edge, because obviously I want to tuck that second paper underneath and also the pom-pom trim. So doing the same with this paper, just curling up those edges so that I can tuck things underneath it. I say those edges, it's just the torn edge that I'm curling up, and then adding my wet glue and slipping that underneath the first strip. So now onto the pom-pom trim, and this is ever so easy to add. If you use wet glue, I find it the easiest. So I'm just going to add a bead of wet glue all the way down that torn edge, just underneath, and then tuck the pom-pom trim in. This looks like it takes longer than it actually does, because at the bottom I decided that it needed to meet, so I was creating a bit of a buckle up here. So I just had to smooth it back out and then trim the end off. You'll see what I mean. If you just pull it tight and try not to use the whole length, just use what you need, it's much easier. So just trimming that end off, and then I turn it over because I realise that the papers are overhanging ever so slightly. So that's that left hand strip sorted. So now I'm going to work on the photo. I'm really enjoying adding a small border of white at the moment, so I'm just going to map this onto some white cardstock. You could just leave it as the photo as is, but I do like that separation between the photo and the bits and pieces that I tuck underneath it. So I'm just matting this onto a scrap piece of white card. Well, that's not a scrap, that's a whole piece, because I didn't have any scraps big enough, but you can use scraps. And now I'm just having a play with all these bits and pieces that I've cut out at the beginning. That yellow circle I don't actually end up using in the end, but I may use it on a future layout, so I've got it anyway. And that was punched with my 2 inch punch. So anyway, I'm just having a play with all the bits and pieces that I cut out. That's the semicircle there, the walk in the park piece, and it's funny because it does end up there, but I do move it around the page a little bit before resting on that place. So now I want to create a scallop border to add underneath the photo. So I'm using the paper with the yellow on the reverse, and I'm using that 2 inch circle that I'd punched out. If you bought the kit from me, you'll have a circle template to use for this. And I'm just drawing semicircles all the way around. Half semicircles around the circle is what I'm trying to say, oh my goodness. And now I'm just trimming that down and then cutting around those pencil lines to create the scallop. I decided to do the full 12 inches. I don't need the full 12 inches, but I thought it would be easier than trying to guess, and then I can position the scallops exactly where I want them along that line. So just moving all the bits and pieces down now to see how it all fits. And I know I want something else along the bottom there. I feel like that yellow's a little bit too bright in amongst all the cool tones that I've got going on. So just roughing up the edges slightly, having a look to see what else I've got, and I decide to bring this paper back in. So I'm just trimming off the torn edge, about 1 inch deep, and I'm going to use that. I start by setting it underneath the scallop, but in fact I add it on top of the scallop in the end. So just trimming that down to size, and then I can work out exactly where it's going to go and what I'm going to do with it. So this is where I decide that I want to put it on top of that scallop, and I want to add something to it, a little bit more detail. I'm bearing in mind that this is a class kit, so I can't really start pulling out my sewing machine and stitching along, which is the temptation. So roll up the edges just to give me a little bit of thinking time, and then I decide to notch out 2 little notches at either end and then tie some twine around it. So I'm just going around twice with the twine, and it will sit neatly in those notches that I've carved out with the hole punch. Trimming it down to size, and then I'll tie this in a knot for now. I do come back and tie it in a bow. So once that's tied on, I can stick that down. And it just nestles nicely underneath that photo there. So now to start playing with these bits and pieces again that I've cut out. I'm still not exactly sure of the positioning, but I decide that I want that real life piece at the top. I like the square shape of that at the top with all the circles at the bottom of the page. So just having a play again with that lovely circular arrow that I punched out, and that highs and lows, it'll be okay piece. I decide the good enough arrow needs to be trimmed down to an arrow shape to sit underneath that journaling card. And then I want to cut out some of the little elements from this paper. First of all, the piece that says Simple Pleasures. So I just trim that off, and then I'm cutting around the words, and that will go at the bottom of the page. Again, not decided exactly where, but I know it's going down there somewhere. So just having a play with all these bits. And then this is where I move that A Walk in the Park back up to the top. So start gluing down now, because I've decided I'm much happier with the positioning of things. So getting that photo down fairly quickly so that I don't stick everything around it without it being firmly in place. And then that lovely semicircle works really nicely against that real life piece. And as I say, just because it says A Walk in the Park, that doesn't need to be taken literally. They were about to take a walk in the park, and that just happens to be the route that they take to high school. But it could be the fact that they're finding it easy, that they're going up to high school and they're ready for it. So you can take that phrase as you wish. So just using my T-square ruler to check that everything's straight here before I carry on. And then sticking down that scallop. And I know I want to embellish around the bottom right hand corner of the photo as well, so I will bring some bits and pieces in to add there. So first of all, this circle is going to go on top of the scallop border rather than being tucked underneath. So I just want to take it off the page slightly at the bottom. So trimming a tiny section of that off so that I can take it off the page. And then it's these 2 pieces again. So I fiddle for a bit, tie a bow while I'm thinking, and then get these glued down. So now onto that journaling card, and I want to tuck it underneath the photo so it's not too separate and feels like it's all a part of the layout. I do love this layering technique where things are just tucked underneath ever so slightly to make them all part of the layout, as I say. And then adding one of the JD3DPrint wood cameras before going on to my journaling. So my journaling just reads, walking to Bottler for your first transition day. Thank heavens for good weather and a beautiful walk to calm the nerves. So then I add the Flair badge next to that camera, diagonally next to it, and then this beautiful woven star in between the 2 at the bottom. And here I go to answer the door and forget to press record while I finish it. So I'm just leaving you with some close-ups and I'll explain what I did. I've got the Little Joy's pink heart next to that wood camera, and also the yellow arrow from that paper that we cut at the beginning. And then I added a sprinkling of sequins to finish the page off. I'm so sorry that I cut that last bit off. I really don't like it when that happens. But I suppose nobody's perfect, hey? Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this. If you're local, please do check out the Warrington Crop for Paper Crafters on Facebook. We welcome new members all the time. And until next time, thanks for joining me. Bye.